Hello everyone, my name is John Sierra and I am a Tolkien scholar, and welcome to part 2 of my Tolkien Iceberg Explained video. I did have it in my head that even though there were a lot of things on this iceberg that I would be able to get through it all in one shot. It was very much not the case. It's got to be 2 parts or perhaps even 3. Hopefully we can get through this in 2 parts. I don't want the videos to be too long, but let's get right into it and bring this up. Okay, so here's the first part that we haven't done, so let's just go through this. Aragorn's character development happened off-screen before the events of The Lord of the Rings. This is referencing the movie where Aragorn has to have this arc. He starts off sort of wishy-washy, he doesn't seem to want to be the king of Gondor, and he has to learn to sort of like grow into that role and to want to be the king, whereas in the book he was actually kind of itching to be the king, and all that happened previously. There were a lot of changes to the basic characters that Peter Jackson made because he wanted the character to have an arc, but Aragorn had already had his arc. Sam had too many children. Sam had the exact amount of children that he wanted to. When he was about to get married, Frodo asked him when he was going to move into... this was after, of course, the War of the Rings. Sam asked him, when are you going to move into Bag End and live with me? And he says, well, I'd like nothing better than that, but also, I was thinking of getting married. And he said, oh, get married and live here with your wife. You can have as large a family as you'd like. This place is big. And he'd like to have a large family. Sam had 13 kids. Let's see, there was Eleanor, there was Frodo, Rose, Merry, Pippin, Goldilocks, Hamfast, Daisy, Primrose, Bilbo, Ruby, Robin, and Tolman. I think that's all 13. So he had 13 kids. It's the record for any Hobbit. No Hobbits had more than 13 kids previous to this, or had 13 at all. So yeah, I don't know if it's too many. It's a lot. I would think that's too many, but maybe Sam didn't think so. Otherwise, he might have stopped at some point. Hobbit genealogy. Hobbits are very, very into their own genealogies. They're really good at making their family trees and tracing their roots. That's mentioned. I believe in The Lord of the Rings, actually. It could have been in The Hobbit, though, but I believe it was The Lord of the Rings because I think it had to have been because it was in reference to the relation between Bilbo and Frodo, which, due to a marriage, they're either first cousins or second cousins once removed, either way. When I traced the genealogy myself, I did find them to be second cousins, but you could interpret it a different way as well. The 3 kinds of hobbit, there are Falahides, which are tall and lean, tall for hobbits at least. There's the Stoors, which are slightly shorter and they're stockier. They're the only hobbits that can grow facial hair. They have big hands and feet. They basically look like short men. They might be the oldest of the hobbit races because they're sort of like an offshoot of the race of men. And then there's Harfoots, which are the smallest. They have browner skin. And these became the most populous hobbits. So when they all started intermarrying and everything, they basically all became Harfoots. Although you see some hobbits out there with, especially from older families, with Falahidish traits or Stoorish traits. The distinction between Quenya and Sindarin. Quenya is actually the original Elven language devised by Iluvatar for the use of the Elves, the firstborn children of Iluvatar. And as a matter of fact, if you think of the word Quenya, Quendi is the name for Elves. That's what they call themselves. They are the Quendi. And that was their language, Quenya, language of Elves. Sindarin was a language that came later because the Elves they all awakened in Middle-earth, but then they were supposed to make this great migration, this trip over to Aemon, and not all of them went. Some of them just didn't make it. Like Círdan is an example. He tried to get there, but something happened. He sort of got jammed up and he didn't get there. So, and then there are Elves that came back over from Aemon to Middle-earth, after the destruction of the 2 trees. And so you have these Elves that were there already, had developed their own language. And, so basically Sindarin is sort of like the Middle-earth language, and Quenya is sort of the Aemon language. And eventually it was decided that all Elves in Middle-earth should speak Sindarin, generally speaking, because it was just the more popular language, even though the Elves felt generally, the ones that spoke Quenya felt that it was the better language. They agreed to mostly speak Sindarin. So there you go. C's are pronounced as K. So in Elven and human languages, you never get a C that's like a ceiling. Like you'll get the word ceiling, but when it comes to names of people or places, any sort of proper nouns, like if you were to write the word ceiling as the name of a place in Lord of the Rings, it would be Caeling, you know. So that's why you get Celeborn, Celebrian, Curanir, Kurumo, same person, but different name. Anything with a C in it, it's always the hard C, the K. Numenore's gender equality. So Numenor is the only human kingdom that has ruling queens. Usually there is a ruling king, and whoever is the next male heir, whether it's the king's oldest son, or if he has no sons, the oldest male heir being the whoever's next in line that is a male. And that was actually the case early on in Numenor. But then what happened is there was a king called Eldarion, and Eldarion married Erendis, and they sort of just had like a bad marriage. They really weren't meant to be. He really wasn't looking for a wife. She was looking to be with him, but she wanted to change him, and it became a whole thing. And he kept traveling. He always wanted to go out to sea and travel to Middle-earth. She wanted him to stay. She hated the sea, and he wanted to go kind of one last trip, and she told him, I really don't want you to go. And he kind of insisted, and he said it was only going to be 2 years, but he got delayed. And it had to do with, in the Second Age, this was that Sauron was returning, and he was helping the elves, and he didn't come back for, I think it was 5 or 6 years. And he had a little baby daughter, this little girl, Alcalame. So when he came back, his wife was very cold. His marriage is basically over. They didn't have divorce. Right, but he still had a wife, but they didn't consider themselves to be married. They basically stayed away from each other. They basically hated each other at this point, and it sort of became like a power struggle between them two, because she sort of raised her daughter to be sort of someone who hates men and distrusts men, and then he was looking at her like, you know what, this kid's more like me than like her. And it was sort of like their way to try to defeat each other, was the way that the daughter would be. And so what he did was he changed the laws in Numenor in the Second Age to the eldest child becomes the king or the queen, regardless of gender, and that continued on. And there were several ruling queens of Numenor, that didn't carry through to Gondor, and that caused the issue that stopped Arvedui from becoming the king of Gondor. But that's what that is about, the gender equality, so to speak, in Numenor. Anatar was the name that Sauron used when he appeared to the elves and gave them the ability to make rings of power. He taught them how to make rings of power. Anatar means, Altar is like lord or king. Ana is gifts, this is lord of gifts. He came bearing gifts. And, of course, he was deceiving them. Celebrimbor was the greatest elven smith of Eregion. He was the one that forged the 3 rings. He was sort of like Anatar's star pupil. And he was, I believe, one of the bearers of the three rings, because originally it was him and Gil-galad, who was the king, and Galadriel. And, of course, Gil-galad passed away, and Elrond got that ring. And Celebrimbor died as well, and his ring went to Círdan, and then, of course, Círdan later on gave it to Gandalf. And there's Gil-galad. Gil-galad was High King of the Noldor at the time. He was actually the last High King of the Noldor. He was killed by Sauron at the end of the Second Age, and there weren't really enough Noldor left to have any kind of kingdom. They were really spread out, and like Gondor, they didn't have ruling queens. There was Galadriel, but she was a ruling queen of Lothlorien. So sort of the highest ranking elf after that was Círdan, the king of Lindon, but he was not High King of the Noldor, because he, technically speaking, was not a Noldor elf. He was what they call a Sinda elf. So because he had never made it to Aemon. Okay, Sam followed Frodo after Rosie died. Sam was over 100 years old. His wife died. She was 98 years old. and then he also sailed west, or at least as far as we know, he left the Shire to seek the Grey Havens and find a boat, and hopefully he did make it to Valinor. We're not 100% sure. Mathams, I think I mentioned this last time. Mathams are actually trinkets that hobbits give away on their birthdays. When we were talking about the birthday customs, a matham is any object that a hobbit has just to have it. It's of no particular use or no particular item, so like a tchotchke, just something you have because you like it. And when you give away presents on your birthday, because that's the way that it works for hobbits, they generally give away mathams. No allegories. Yeah, Tolkien hated allegories. He did do some allegorical work in a short story called Leaf by Niggle, but he didn't really care for. He had a heated and polite distrust of allegory. He was in favor of application, and he felt that most people did not know the difference, or that they saw something that could apply to something in real life that was in a story, and they think, well, that's an allegory. A lot of people made an assumption that Lord of the Rings is an allegory for the First World War or the Second World War or whatever, and Tolkien's sort of reply to this was, well, it isn't. That wasn't in his mind. That's an application. You have applied it to that, and he's for that, but don't call it allegory, because an allegory would be something more like the Chronicles of Narnia, where Aslan is an allegorical character for Jesus Christ. He's meant to represent Jesus, and that's the intent of the author. And so that's, he really didn't like allegories. The Hobbits' real names, there's a note that, of course, there's the whole idea that Tolkien didn't actually write these, that he translated them. Of course, he actually did write it, but he was fashioning himself as translating stories told by Frodo or by Bilbo, and that that they had their own language, which we would have called Westron, right? Or the common speech in Middle-earth. And then, of course, in translating it to English, the names got translated as well. So hobbits had different names, and he translated them. That's the whole idea behind that one. Faramir and Sam were born in the same year. Not much to say there. That is true. They are exactly the same age. Of course, Sam would be considered sort of younger, since hobbits come of age at 33 years old. Men, generally speaking, come of age at 18, although in Numenor it was 25, but that's because they lived longer, and so, there's that as well. But definitely, Sam would be considered younger by his span of life, but the same age by span of years. It's just how the races are different. Okay. The animated movies, of course, there was the Hobbit by Rankin Bass, and then there was the Lord of the Rings, fashioned sometimes as the Lord of the Rings Part 1, because it only ran through Helm's Deep. That was a Ralph Bakshi film, and he never got to make a Part 2, but there was The Return of the King from Rankin Bass. There was also an earlier Hobbit movie in like the 60s that was sort of an ash can that was only about 12 minutes long. You could watch it on YouTube. It barely has anything to do with The Hobbit, but it was to hang on to the rights. They had to make a story that was called The Hobbit that was shown to people that were paying customers, so it had like one showing, and it had some similarities with The Hobbit. That's all I can really say there. Pippin is a child. I, of course, mentioned that hobbits come of age at 33. Pippin is 28, so he is still considered a boy. Part of the reason that, certain characters such as Elrond were against him going to be in the Fellowship of the Ring, but of course he insisted. The Blue Wizards, of course, there were 5 chief Istari. We know the White Wizard was Saruman, the Brown Wizard is Radagast, the Grey Wizard is Gandalf, and there were 2 Blue Wizards. Their names in Valinor were Alatar and Palando, and they had other names that were given to them by the elves. They didn't have names given to them by the men, but like Gandalf was called Mithrandir by the elves, so they did have elven names as well. It would be Moranitar and Romastano, and they weren't really all that well known. There's not a lot of information about them. They supposedly traveled to the areas to the east, which is Rhûn, and to the south, which is Harad, and which were enemy occupied. And Tolkien had some different ideas about what happened after that. His initial idea was that they failed and just sort of continued to be wizards and sort of gave birth to the whole wizard trope in European folklore through their cult of magic. And then later he changed his mind and said they didn't fail. they did in fact help to greatly undermine Sauron's power in these areas in a very important way that we just didn't really see because it was all behind the scenes. The Hobbit by Guillermo del Toro. So after The Lord of the Rings, you might wonder, why did they do the Lord of the Rings films first and then The Hobbit? Because Peter Jackson wanted to do 3 movies. He wanted to do The Hobbit, Lord of the Rings Part 1, Lord of the Rings Part 2. And he found out that the rights that he had purchased, which was through Harvey Weinstein's company, did not actually include The Hobbit. So he had to go ahead and do The Lord of the Rings and then come back to The Hobbit later. 2 films became 3 because that's what Miramax wanted, which was a good thing because the Lord of the Rings is generally sold as 3 volumes. When it came time to do The Hobbit, they did want to expand it into multiple films. Peter Jackson was the producer. He initially declined to actually direct it, and Guillermo del Toro came to direct it. And many of the ideas in these movies are actually his ideas, but he did quit the project and was replaced by Peter Jackson. And that's when it became 3 films because the studio wanted 3 and wanted another trilogy. And earlier, I think I said Miramax. It's actually New Line Cinema. Miramax only wanted 1 film. That was their whole thing. The death of Frodo's parents. Frodo's parents died when he was 2 years old in a boating accident. Some people like to come up with crazy fan fiction saying that like they were drowned by Gollum. It's not true. Hobbits evolved from men. I mentioned this. They're sort of an offshoot of men. Halfling means half man, a man at half the size. The earliest hobbits were probably just very short men with hairy feet. They became the Stores. The Falahides and the Harfoots followed from there. So they're sort of a branch in the path of evolution of men. Sauron was hot AF. Well, if you look up any picture of Sauron, you can see that he's usually very attractive physically. He was fair. He was an angel, and he could take fair form. Of course, after the Calibeth, he lost his ability to take and hold a fair form, so he wasn't pretty after that. But Sauron is generally a very pretty person before that. Howard Shore's leitmotifs, of course. It's actually leitmotifs with an F. This person spelled it wrong. Leitmotif is a sort of like a musical theme that plays during certain points, like usually tied to a character or something like that. There was a lot of that in Howard Shore's music in The Lord of the Rings. Dies Irae, speaking of music, Dies Irae is a classical piece. It actually played in The Fellowship of the Ring in the scene where Bilbo gives up the ring and he has his hand and he does this and the ring falls down and clunk, really heavy like. So that was where Dies Irae was. Grima ate Lotho. Lotho was Frodo's cousin. Lotho Sackville Baggins. He sort of tried to take over the Shire and be like the boss of the Shire. And then, of course, Saruman came in and took over for him. And eventually Saruman decided to eliminate Lotho, and he had Grima kill him, Grima Wormtongue. And Saruman revealed to the hobbits when they were trying to reach out to Grima, saying, you didn't do anything wrong. You should stay. You don't have to go with Saruman, because he was abusing Grima, and Grima really, was kind of pathetic at this point, and they wanted to show Grima mercy. And Saruman, said, "Oh, you think he did? He killed Lotho, and I think he buried him, but he's been hungry lately, so who knows? And I don't think that Grima actually ate Lotho. I don't see him as a cannibal type. I don't think that happened. I think Saruman was saying it as a lie, and he didn't want to lose the one guy that was like his whipping boy, that he treated like a dog. Actually dogs are usually treated better. So Gigants, not sure what that refers to. There are giants in Tolkien's world. They're not called giants, they're just called giants. The Hobbit has a whole section where they have to kind of sneak past some giants that are throwing rocks back and forth. Okay, so we have some weird theories. Some people like Gandalf is evil, Tom Bombadil is evil, Tom Bombadil is Tolkien. Not true. Gandalf is not evil, Tom Bombadil is not evil. Tom Bombadil is not Tolkien. Tom Bombadil is a mystery. You're not supposed to know who Tom Bombadil is. He's definitely not the author. Just fun theories that people come up with. Disney hate. Yeah, Disney wanted to do The Lord of the Rings at some point, and J.R.R. Tolkien himself said absolutely not. He hated Disney, and he hated the idea of Disney doing The Lord of the Rings. The Silmarils, of course, are these 3 gems created by Feanor back in the Years of the Trees, and they captured the light of the 2 trees of Valinor. They were the greatest works of craftsmanship, greater even than anything that Aula, the Valar, could do. And they were made out of a mysterious element called Silmarilli that only Feanor knew about. They could not be recreated by anybody else. And they were just something that was greatly coveted. And of course, the Silmarillion derives from Silmarils, so that's where that comes from. Christian or Catholic influence. So Tolkien basically stated that The Lord of the Rings was a Catholic work, unintended at first pass, but intended by final draft. So he basically found that there were themes of religion in the story that he was putting in there without realizing, and then just decided to run with it. Beren and Luthien. Okay, so Beren and Luthien were sort of like the Aragorn and Arwen of the First Age. Beren was a man, Luthien was an elf. She was actually the daughter of an elf king, King Thingol, and a Maya, an angel named Melian. And she was the elven princess of Doriath, and Beren fell in love with her. And Thingol told Beren, if you want my daughter, you're going to have to go to where Morgoth is and retrieve one of the Silmarils from his crown. And that's the story of Beren and Luthien, is the story of them attempting to be together. And there's a lot more to it than that. It's a crazy, crazy good story that you should definitely check out. It is told in the Silmarillion, but I recommend the standalone novel Beren and Luthien as well. Really good stuff. Aragorn is very much like Beren, and of course, Arwen is very much like Luthien, and the characters were based off of Tolkien and his wife. And when they were buried, it says on their graves, John, Ronald, Ruel, Tolkien, Beren, and Edith Tolkien, Luthien. If you could look it up, picture their gravestones. So it does say that. The sun is a girl. Yep, that's true. So after the two trees were broken and destroyed, the only thing surviving was a fruit of the tree Laurelin, which became the sun and is referred to as the daughter of Laurelin, which is born across the sky by a female Maya called Arian. And then there is a seed of Telperion, the silver tree, which became the moon. And that is referred to as the son of Telperion, and is bore by a male Maya called Ithilien. So, yeah. The sun is feminine and the moon is masculine in Tolkien's world. Black Numenoreans, I think I mentioned this last week. They are Numenoreans who practice black magic. They fell under Sauron's influence. They joined the cult that worshipped Morgoth. And, black doesn't refer to skin shade or anything like that. It refers to black magic or Morgul magic. They became necromancers or sorcerers. The mouth of Sauron is a black Numenorean, for example. The origin of Beorn. Nobody really knows where Beorn came from. Gandalf really mentioned that he wasn't sure whether Beorn was a man that could take the shape of a bear or a bear that could take the shape of a man. Beorn is a very rare Tolkien creature called a skin changer, which is basically someone who can change into something else, although you don't know which the true form is in the case of Beorn. Gimli is a female dwarf. This is very silly. The text is very clear that Gimli is a guy. It is mentioned that female dwarves do look so similar to male dwarves and dress in male clothing whenever they travel, which is extremely rare, that you would mistake them for male dwarves, which has led to the belief by many that female dwarves actually had beards. Did they have beards? Probably, but maybe not. It's sort of a gray area. Tolkien once said that all dwarves had beards. And when he was asked in a letter, though, later on, is it true that all dwarves have beards? He replied, the men do. So it's sort of one of those things where he might have said all dwarves have beards, and he meant the reader to understand that he was referring to only men. However, it is true that possibly the female dwarves had beards, and then you can come up with some fanciful idea that Gimli is a female dwarf. It is not the case. So there you go. Okay, we got through that layer in, I want to say record time, but we got through it. This one's a little bigger. Okay, the Silmarillion I already mentioned. That's the book that tells several stories of the creation, the years of the trees, the years of the lamps first, years of the trees, the first age, and and a little bit of the second age, and of course it has the last chapter that sort of tells the story of the third age. It's sort of the prequel, highly recommended, but very difficult read. Ainu Landala is the first section of the Silmarillion that deals with the creation of the world. Ainu Landala means music of the Ainur, and it's sort of the song of creation. Eru Iluvatar is God. Nothing much to say about that. He created the Ainur, and then he composed the music that they sang out, and then that created the world. The Valar and the Maiar are the Ainur. Ainur are angels, holy ones, that descended to the world to live there, and the 15 greatest among them were called the Powers, which in Quenya is the Valar, and the rest of them were the Beautiful, which in Quenya is Maiar. So, for example, Sauron, Saruman, Gandalf, Ianwa, those characters are Maya, whereas the Valar would be like Mandos and Manwa and Varda and Irmo and Osse, you know. Aula created the dwarves. That is true. He did create the dwarves. He did not, since he wasn't Iluvatar, he was a Valar, he did not have the ability to create what is known as true life. He could create something that looked like life. So he created the dwarves, and they could move around and do everything, and he was teaching them how to speak the language of the dwarves, Kuzdul. And then Iluvatar was like, what are you doing? You know you can't do this. You don't have the secret fire, the flame imperishable. You can't create life, because they will only do what you want them to do. They will only move when you tell them to move. And if your thought is elsewhere, they will stay idle. Is this really what you want? And Aula was sort of like, no, I'm sorry. I'm a creator. You made me that way with this, this urge to create. And I wanted there to be more different types of creatures. And I thought you'd be cool with this. And I'm very sorry. I guess I should just destroy them. I'm really sorry. And as he went to destroy the dwarves with the great hammer, they cringed and flinched and cried out, which he did not tell them to do. And Iluvatar said, stop, do you not see what they are doing? Your wish has been granted, even as it was spoken. So Iluvatar gave them true life. He took pity on the dwarves, and that's where the dwarves came from. Okay, Manwa created the stars. I jumped ahead there, actually, my bad. Yavanna created the wizards and the Maiar. Hold on. There's Yavanna created and then the wizards are Maiar. The wizards are Maiar. I just mentioned that. The Astari are all Maiar, but they're incarnates. They're bound to bodies. So they could grow old. They could. They start off kind of old already, but they do age. They can get thirsty, hungry, tired, sleepy. They go to the bathroom. All that stuff. They can die. They can feel pain. Yavanna created there's something missing there. Yavanna did create most plants and animals, so that might be what was supposed to be there, and that's an error. Iluin and Ormo were the two lamps that originally lit the planet. They were in Middle-earth, one to the north and one to the south. Melkor went down and broke them, creating darkness, and then they created the two trees, and then he destroyed those, and that's where the sun and the moon came from. So Telperion and Laurelin, I already mentioned, are the trees. Laurelin is the gold one. Telperion is the silver one. They were in Valinor, and it was daytime when Laurelin waxed, and then when it waned and Telperion waxed, it was nighttime. That's how that worked. Morgoth came there with a spear and stabbed the trees, and their sap, which was like light, flowed out of them, and Ungoliant drank it up and killed them. Varda created the stars. That is true. All the stars in the sky were lights created by Varda. They were the only lights in Middle-earth when the elves awakened, because the two lamps had already been destroyed, and Middle-earth is far away from where the trees are, so it was at night. So this was the first light seen by the elves, and it was created by Varda. Manwa created the eagles. That is true. That's kind of true. It's kind of not true. The very first great eagles were Maya, which means they were Ainur. They were created by Iluvatar. So they worked for Manwa. Each Maya sort of like works for certain Valar, like, that's just how that works. And the descendants of the original eagles are not Maya, because Maya can procreate, just like Melian did, but their offspring are not also angels. Only Iluvatar can make more Ainur. So Manwa didn't really create the eagles. The eagles are under his dominion in a way. They really answer only to Manwë. He is the king of Arda. They are in his service, but he did not create them. That's actually not true. Melkor's redemption. Melkor, like I said, he did break lamps and everything. There was the War of the Valar. He was chained for 3 ages in Valinor before they let him go. So he did, at one point, redeem himself. Some of the Valar were against it. Some of them were just like, we have to heal and move forward. He does seem like he's sorry and he's not going to do it again. Of course he did. But that's another story. Sauron used to be good. It's like what Elrond said in The Lord of the Rings. He said, nothing is evil in the beginning. Even Sauron was once good. He was a Maya in the service of the Valar Aula. His name was Mairon, and he got corrupted by Melkor. That's how he became Sauron. Men were born with the sun. Born is an incorrect word, right? Awakened. Awakened is the word. The elves originally awakened, and with the 2 trees, right? And then the second-born children of Iluvatar, the men, awakened with the sun and the moon. The Balrogs are corrupted Maiar. That is true. They were spirits of flame that decided to go with Melkor. The first orcs were corrupted elves. Maybe. That's what one of Tolkien's many ideas about where the orcs came from. We do know that the orcs were created in mockery of elves, right? We don't know that they were elves. That's probably the case. Tolkien was a little uncomfortable with the idea. He did have some other ideas, such as that they were originally men, or that they were actually just animals, that they were mindless beasts that he gave intelligence to and that he gave souls to using necromancy. He didn't like the idea of there being a race that was always evil. That was sort of the problem. They were definitely created in mockery of elves. Were they elves? I would say that the text says so. Tolkien sort of wavered on it. He changed his mind a lot. And keep in mind that the Silmarillion and all this other stuff that's not The Hobbit or The Lord of the Rings was all published after his death. So he can't really comment on it much. So that's all I can say about that. Elves' true name is Quendi. I mentioned that earlier. The Noldor, the Vanyar, and the Teleri, those are 3 different types of elves. They're sort of the 3 cultures of elves that went to Aman. The ones that stayed behind initially were called Morquendi, or Dark Elves. They decided they didn't like that too much, and they started calling themselves Umanyar, which is not of Aman. Elves existed before the sun and the moon. I already mentioned that they awoken with the trees. The sun and the moon weren't a thing yet. The kinslaying, there were actually several kinslayings. Feanor and his sons were mostly responsible for this. It was after the 2 trees were destroyed, and then Morgoth. Oh, he wasn't called Morgoth yet, but Melkor. He stole the Silmarils, and he left. He went to Middle-earth. And Feanor wanted to go get the Silmarils back, and he also wanted revenge because the Silmarils were something he created, and also his father, Finwë, was slain. So he made an oath along with his sons that stated that they would get the Silmarils back no matter what happens. Anybody who stands in their way, anybody who withholds the Silmarils from them or obstructs them in any way will be killed. And they all took this oath. And when you swear an oath before Iluvatar not only makes sure that you do it, but that punishes you for taking that oath. So one of the first things they did was they wanted to find a way to get to Middle-earth. So they went to a northern part of Aman where the Teleri elves were, because they were the Noldor. And the Teleri elves had ships, and they said, we need your ships, we're going to Middle-earth. And the Teleri elves said, nuts to that. You're not taking our ships to go to Middle-earth. That's ridiculous. So they killed them because they had to, because they were bound to their oath. So that was the first kinslaying. There were 2 other kinslayings that happened in Middle-earth. But yeah, there you go. Galadriel's hair. It's the most beautiful thing Gimli's ever seen. Some people believe that Galadriel's hair is like a Silmaril, sort of. It captures the light of the trees. It does say that her hair was beautiful, golden, as if it captured the light of Lorelin. And it's sort of like, what's funny is that her husband was Celeborn, which actually means silver tree, by the way. I wanted to point that out. And he had silver hair that looked like Telparian. So looking upon them was like looking upon the 2 trees. It was just a metaphor, though. The light of the trees was not actually captured in her hair. But Gimli thought her hair was amazing, and he wanted to set the 3 strands of hair that she gave him into gems. And that would be sort of like the dwarven equivalent of a Silmaril, which is really interesting. The Feanorians, that's Feanor, his sons, his followers. Feanorian letters. So Feanor was really this amazing guy before he became evil. He created the Silmarils, he created the Palantir, the Seeing Stones, and he also created the Elven alphabet. There was an alphabet previous to that for Quenya, but he made an alphabet that could be used for Quenya, it could be used for Sindarin, it could be used for the speech of men, it could be used for anything. The inscription on the ring is actually in what is called the Feanorian letters, or Tengwar script is another way of putting it. It's the language there is the Black Speech of Mordor, but the Black Speech of Mordor is only spoken, it doesn't have an alphabet. So Sauron used the Feanorian letters. So even Sauron approved of Feanor's alphabet. Glaurung was the father of all dragons. He was the first dragon. He did not have wings. That should be mentioned. And Calagon was the first winged dragon, right? But anyway, Glaurung was a pretty nasty dragon. He wound up being slain by Turin. If you want to read more about that, you should read, obviously, the Silmarillion, but also the book The Children of Húrin speaks about Glaurung. And Calagon the Black, I just mentioned him. He was the first winged dragon and also the greatest and mightiest dragon of all time. He was slain by Earendil in the War of Wrath. Thingol and Melian, I mentioned. I already mentioned a lot of this. Wow, I hit on this too. Thingol was the king of Doriath. Melian was a Maya. She went to Middle-earth to live among people. They met. They fell in love instantly, and they just stared into each other's eyes and held hands, and they couldn't move. They were transfixed by their love. They couldn't say anything, and they were just stuck there for years. The whole forest grew around them, and they became the king and queen of Doriath, and of course their daughter is Luthien. Maya are shapeshifters. All Ainur are shapeshifters in the way that they can take raiment, which is a clothing sort of the shape and hue. They can make themselves look like this or look like that, right? The exceptions would be if they're incarnates, then they're bound to a certain form. That's what you see with the wizard, you know. Sorry, it's Discord. Morgoth's scars. Morgoth had a bunch of scars. A lot of them were delivered to him by an elf named Fingolfin, who dueled him. Morgoth technically won, but he got really messed up. He was wounded grievously 7 times, and then an 8th time on the leg, which gave him a limp. And he was so angry that when he finally did kill Fingolfin, he wanted to just break his body to pieces. And that didn't happen because Thorondor, the Lord of the Eagles, came and clawed at Morgoth's face and then bore Fingolfin's body away. So, he also had scars all over his face from the eagle. Morgoth's crown, he did have a crown when he took the shape of a great dark lord. He kept that shape. He had a crown, and he put the Silmarils on his crown. Because he was evil, he could not hold them without experiencing intense pain. That was sort of the light burning him, but he wanted to keep them. He liked them. He wanted to withhold them from anybody else, so he put them on his crown. Of course, he lost one to Beren. Beren got one off of his crown in Beren and Luthien, and he still had 2 left after that. Sauron is Morgoth's lieutenant. Not much to say there. That is absolutely true. He was Morgoth's lieutenant. Utumno and Angband, those were the 2 fortresses of Morgoth. Utumno means hell. It was his greatest fortress. It was destroyed by the Valar. Angband was in a place called Thangorodrim, which was sort of like 3 volcanoes, and that was his second fortress, and that was destroyed after the War of Wrath when Beleriand was sunk under the waves. Tom Bombadil is Iluvatar. No, he's not. Tolkien even dismissed that one himself, saying that the only time that Iluvatar would walk upon the earth is as Jesus, not as Tom Bombadil. Tom Bombadil is a Maya? Probably not. He's not anything. He's just Tom Bombadil. He's a merry fellow. Bright blue his jacket is, and his boots are yellow. That's Bombadil's whole deal. Ungoliant is Shelob's mom. It's actually mentioned in The Lord of the Rings when they describe Shelob as the last child of Ungoliant. Ungoliant was sort of this mysterious demon that took a shape of a spider, and she worked with Morgoth, destroyed the 2 trees. She wound up betraying Morgoth and then running off because he sicked the Balrogs on her. She went and fled to the southern section of Middle-earth and was never seen again. And it was believed that her hunger got the better of her, and she eventually consumed herself somehow. But she did have children, and the last of which was Shelob. So there you go. Turin's bad luck. Read the Children of Húrin, that's all I could say. Turin was one of Húrin's children. There was Turin, there was Nienor, and there was Morwen. Morwen was his wife, Urwin. Urwin died when she was really little. So when you say the children of Turin, the children of Húrin, you're generally referring to Turin and Nienor. It's a crazy story. They wound up marrying each other through crazy circumstance because they didn't recognize each other when they met later in life. They were separated for so long. And she had no memories. It's a whole thing. Very tragic story is the life of Turin and Nienor. And their father, Húrin, had to watch the whole thing happen. The second kinslaying, well, I did mention there were 3 kinslayings. I'm not going to get into the details of each one, but there were 3 kinslayings. The Gift of Men. The Gift of Men is actually death, believe it or not. It's also called the Doom of Man. Elves don't die, no matter what. Even if they kill themselves or if they're themselves killed or slain, they just go to a place called the Halls of Waiting, also known as the Halls of Mandos, and are eventually re-embodied. They could choose to stay in the Halls of Mandos, or they could be remanded to stay there because of crimes. But generally speaking, they're still not dead. They don't pass from the world. They don't have an afterlife. No matter how weary they grow, they persist. They're tied to the planet. They're here till the end of the world, or until the world is remade. Men die for real. They pass from the world. They get to go to the timeless halls and meet Iluvatar. They are judged by him. And then there's something after that. We don't know what it is, but there's something after that. There's an afterlife for humans. Gondolin, I mentioned a few times. Gondolin was an elven kingdom. It was a hidden city. You couldn't find it unless you knew where it was. There were 7 gates that led into there. There was, of course, a book all about it called The Fall of Gondolin, which I do recommend. I mean, I recommend all of Tolkien's books, but I'm trying to use this opportunity to recommend some of the lesser-known ones. Some of the really important weapons you see in The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, like Orcrist and Glamdring and Sting, were forged in Gondolin. Elves are flat earthers. Okay, my friend Aeth is really fond of this one. So the world of Arda was originally flat. It was a disc like this. And then the Akalabeth happened in the Second Age, where part of it, let's say this is Middle-earth and this is Aemon. Aemon was removed from it. But let's zoom in on Middle-earth. So then we have, Arda. And then the world was reshaped. The Iluvatar basically took the world and did this. Right? Now it's round. That's what happened. And the Helcarax became the polar ice caps and whatnot. And Aemon exists separately. So let's say this is Arda. Here's Aemon, right? How do you get from here to here, right? How do you get to the west with a capital W? There's something called the straight path. It's straight, meaning that it does not follow the curvature of the planet. It just goes straight. So you sail it and you go off the planet and you continue and you eventually get to Valinor. And that's where the elves go when they sail west with a capital W. It's where Frodo and Bilbo went at the end of the story of The Lord of the Rings as well. Okay. Starting to think this is 3 videos. It's 3. I think it's 3 videos. So yeah, last time we watched The Lord of the Rings, me and a bunch of my friends, Aeth was saying, "Oh, there goes the last of the flat earthers," So yeah, they're not really. They don't believe the world is flat. They know the world is round. They know about Akalabeth. It's just to them they can sail off the planet. They can still get to the west. The Halls of Mandos, I mentioned this a few times. The Halls of Mandos, also known as the Halls of Waiting, is a place. It's not an afterlife. It's a real place in Aemon, in Valinor, where Mandos is. Mandos is the Doomkeeper of the Valar. No one who enters the Halls of Mandos may leave without his permission. Even Manwë would need his permission to leave. So anybody can go in there, right? But you can't leave unless he tells you to. Now, this is where elves go when they quote-unquote die. And then the elves are not supposed to die. So Mandos is going to be like, what happened to you? And, he knows, he can see. So that's where they're sort of judged They might be held for some time before they are re-embodied. They might be held for a really long time before they're re-embodied. They might not be re-embodied. They might just be stuck there. Elves can also choose to stay there. Okay. Anything related to Harad. Harad is a land to the south of Gondor. The people that come from there are called Haradrim. Harad is sort of like northern Africa, like historically you might call it something along the lines of like Carthage, right? And Harad has usually been at war with Gondor. They're usually not too friendly, especially to deal with one region called Umbar, which is sort of a disputed zone that Gondor believes is part of part of Gondor, and Harad believes it's part of Harad. So when you see, like, for example, in the films, like when Aragorn goes through the Pass of the Dead and there are those ships there, the sort of like pirate ships, those are the Corsairs of Umbar. Those are Haradrim. A lot of the men that fought in the Battle of Pelennor Fields were Haradrim. There were also Easterlings, which are from the east, but there were a lot of Haradrim. They're the ones that ride the elephants, for example. There are 2 Loriens. Oh, okay. So this is an interesting one. So there is Lothlorien, also known as just Lorien, which is Galadriel's realm in Middle-earth. But there is also a Lorien that is a Valar. So the Valar all have, Vala is singular, they all have 2 names. For example, Varda, the queen of Arda, is also known as Elbereth. I had to think about it for a second. Elbereth. So Irmo is also known as Lorien. So that's what the other Lorien is. And I think finally, I think we're going to stop here and I'll do the rest because there's still 2 more layers here, right? It's 2? 2, and they're big. That one's really big. That one's not as big. Yeah, they're big. Okay, so we'll just end it here. Fellowship. Okay, so Fellowship is a band, a metal band that plays music based off of like Tolkien's work, Lord of the Rings, and general fantasy. So if you're into that kind of goofy stuff, definitely look it up. It's Fellowship with an exclamation point. They have like a bunch of albums and songs and stuff. So I guess there's going to be a third part where we will go through this part and we will go through this part, because when you get down into the real nitty gritty, the bottom of the iceberg, you know, that's where you really have to spend a lot of time talking about it, I think. Although I spent a lot of time on the first 2. At least I got this one to be under an hour, right? We're at 47 minutes. So I'm going to see you guys next time for part 3.